All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 2021 Student Government Executive Debates. My name is Andrew Logan. I am a senior and the current student trustee. This evening, we will hear from all four executive positions for this debate, starting with treasurer, then secretary, speaker of the House, and ending with president. Just to provide the run of the show for this evening, I will introduce each candidate for their respective position, and then they will give an opening statement. I will then be asking a prepared set of questions and then follow up with any questions that were submitted by students from the student government social media. After the end of questions, the candidates will go into their closing statement, and hopefully it will not end up like the last Trump-Biden debate. Lastly, we shall wait a minute for the next candidate or candidates to get on the Zoom so we can move to our next position. Our first executive candidate is Brooke Blair, who is running for the position of treasurer. She is a rising senior and the current public relations co-chair for student government. Welcome, Brooke. You may now give your opening statement.
Hey everyone, my name is Brooke Blair. I'm a current junior at Wake, and I've been in student government since my sophomore year. I've served on the Student Budget Advisory Committee for the past 2 years, and I've also served as the treasurer for Alpha Phi Omega, which is the largest organization on campus. And I feel like these last 2 points have really prepared me to serve as the treasurer of student government. Firstly, the biggest thing I want to focus on as treasurer is clarity. I think that a lot of times when it comes to funding and reallocating, there's some difficulties and that people don't realize how complex the process is. And I really want to break that down as much as I can and really just create a platform where students know what's going on. And it's all on our website where they can get as much information as they need. Secondly, I want to strengthen the relationship between SBAC and the Student Activity Fee Fund. I think that a lot of organizations don't realize what an incredible opportunity this is to receive funding that is open to all the student organizations. And so I really want to work to promote that. And then also with new organizations being chartered, because that has been put on hold with COVID, I want to set up a workshop where the treasurers and the presidents can come in and kind of learn how SBAC operates. And then from there, they can they're better equipped to help their organization with their finances.
Awesome. Thanks, Brooke. So first question for you is that the treasurer role is such an SBAC intensive job, and many students do not know much about SBAC. Why should people care who the treasurer is?
Yeah, so I think something that students should care about with the treasurer is that it's someone who's organized and obviously has a lot of experience with SBAC. Like I previously said, I've worked in SBAC for 2 years and worked very closely with Victoria Parker, who is our current treasurer, and talked to her a lot about the role and also with our advisor, Amy Cha-Cha. And so this is something that I think the most important aspect is that you have the experience working with student organizations and you have the experience on SBAC. And not only do I have that, I know what it's like to be a treasurer of a major organization and the struggles that they encounter with that. And so that's why I feel like I'm best equipped to handle this position.
Nice. How will you make SBAC more accessible and digestible to students?
Yeah, so like I talked about with my first major point with clarity is that I want to work on having a PDF document that goes on our website that breaks down not only the major questions that I feel like I've received a lot from students as a representative, but also who they can go to with certain questions. So a lot of times there is some confusion if it's an SBAC question or a staff question or a student engagement question. And so kind of break that down with who is best equipped to handle this question and to just show students where they can go to, and also on the document, just provide the general details of how SBAC operates.
Cool. Zoom is the name of the game these days. Any thoughts or suggestions from you on how you will continue to make SBAC and student government successful in this virtual space we're living in now?
Yeah, so I definitely think that this is a unique situation, but we've all adapted pretty well to it. And I think that Victoria did a great job handling our meetings on Zoom. So if that will be the case for next semester, I really just want to try to keep everyone as involved and interactive as possible. So as much as sometimes people don't like it, but keeping your camera on, asking questions, just making sure that everyone's engaged in the process.
All right. And last question is, what are you most excited about for the coming year?
I think what I'm most excited about is that I've really dedicated a lot of time and effort to student government, and it's something that I'm passionate about. And so I just want to be able to carry this out and help develop student government to even a better organization. It's already great, but I definitely want to see how we can just advance it and increase our presence on campus.
Awesome. And now for your closing remarks, if you have any.
Yeah, so I just want to say that I've been a dedicated member of student government and that I've really tried to work to make a difference, to make it a better organization. And not only that, but with SBAC as well. And I would like to just continue that effort as the leader of SBAC and as the treasurer of student government. And that I'm very excited if I were to be elected to this position, and that um, I think I'm prepared to represent the entire student body in this position and just make it as successful as possible.
Awesome. Thanks, Brooke, and great job.
Thank you.
Our next executive candidate is Kate Pitterly, who is running for the position of secretary. She is a rising sophomore and the current student government COVID-19 liaison and senator for student government. Hello, Kate. You may now give your opening statement.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kate Pitterly, and I'm excited to be running for secretary. I currently serve as the senator and COVID-19 liaison in student government. In my time serving in SG, I have made it a priority to fight for causes I believe in and empower other voices to do the same. As a COVID-19 liaison, I've advocated for increased transparency and accountability around university COVID-19 policies and pushed for changes that benefit the wellness of the student body. One such change is my successful advocacy to open kitchens in residence halls. As a senator, I serve on the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. In this role, I have worked with members of Wake Forward on their efforts to increase curriculum around diversity and inclusion. I have also recently begun working with members of the Panhellenic community to further DEI efforts within Greek life. The secretary has a unique opportunity to reshape student government into a more receptive institution, especially during the tumultuous times we're living in. We can push for transparency and open access. We can increase student awareness of what SG does and how they can push for change through their representatives. We can open the door to empower students rather than leaving them in the dark. I want to influence positive change that benefits everyone. I hope you will consider voting for me on April 13th. Thank you.
Awesome, Kate. What do you think the student government needs to do in order to increase transparency with the broader community?
I think there are a number of ways. First, I just want to give a shout out to the student government Instagram. It's been really great this year, and I think it's been a way to inform students of what's going on with student government. I do think, though, that there are other ways that we can make students aware of what's going on with student government. Not everybody has a social media, so I really want to work on the website and doing that. But I also think there's something to be said for communication with students, both through administration, but like through senators. I think like as a senator this year, I think it's been really helpful to communicate with my residence hall and with my friends and share and spread the word on different policies that are happening. And I think especially with COVID-19, we really do need to increase transparency and open access to student government materials. The secretary has like a unique opportunity to do that through organizing student government materials and increasing open access to those materials. So I think that's really important too, so that people can know what student government's doing, what projects we're working on, and that kind of thing.
What's a misconception about student government that you'd like to push back on?
That's an interesting question. I think it's not necessarily a misconception, but I do think a lot of students don't really know what student government does or what it has the capability to do. And I think a lot of people probably don't know that they can contact like people in student government so that they can have their voices be heard. And I think that's why increasing open access and transparency is so important, so that people can know that student government is here for them and that we really want to work to inspire positive change around campus and that we're positioned to do that. And I think that the misconception is that student government isn't like, not that it isn't accessible, but just that students don't really know what it does or that it has that capability.
Nice. Last question for you is, what are you most excited about for next year?
Well, I won't lie. I think that the prospect of students getting vaccinated is really, really exciting. As a COVID-19 liaison, I've been working with administrators about vaccines and that kind of thing. So I've like been really well informed on that issue, and I'm very excited about what the new year brings. especially as we welcome a new class of Deeks into our community. I'm really excited to see what the new year is going to look like and how student government can impact that. I think that next year is going to be very interesting. It's hopefully going to be it's going to be kind of like a new environment for us all. And I'm really excited to see how student government can work with the student body to make it a good year for everyone.
Awesome. Kate, your closing statement.
Yeah, I came to Wake Forest in a time of immense uncertainty. I've watched my friends and peers struggle with mental health, burnout, and the effects the pandemic has had on our world and our university. But I've also seen us persevere. We've gotten through every obstacle and succeeded despite every challenge set against us. As we entered a new year and we welcome a new class of freshmen and continue to support the students already here, whether they're on campus or off. As secretary, I will continue to fight for all of us. We deserve to know what policies are being made and how student government is supporting students during these difficult times. I will push to make that happen. I will be receptive to your voices and work to empower you. I will open the door so that we can move forward together. To learn more about my campaign, you can visit votekate.com. And if you have any questions, I would absolutely love to hear from you. Thank you.
Kate, congratulations and well done. Our next debate is the one for the Speaker of the House. We have two candidates, Ethan Weiner and Braden Strackman. Our first candidate is Braden Strackman, who is running for the position of Speaker of the House. He is a rising junior and the current academic co-chair for student government. Welcome, Braden. You may now give your opening statement.
Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well. My name is Braden Strackman and I'm running for Speaker of the House. I've been in student government since the fall of my freshman year when I was a senator from Johnson Hall. For this academic year, I'm serving as co-chair of the academic committee, as Andrew mentioned, but I'm also serving as Speaker pro tempore. With this experience, I've learned how to collaborate with people in different roles and what are the kind of most efficient techniques for getting things done in student government. I have an in-depth knowledge of what the speaker does, and I'm very much ready to jump into the role. The main goal of my platform is really to empower senators, and through senators, empower students as well. I fully recognize that I'm just one person who only represents one set of lived experiences. So based on this, the best way for me to be an effective speaker is to listen and help senators work on initiatives that are important to them, because the things that are important to me aren't the only things that matter. I'm running for Speaker of the House because I'm the most qualified candidate to help everyone in Senate. And thank you.
Thanks, Braden. Our second candidate is Ethan Weiner. He's also running for Speaker of the House. He's a rising junior and the current judiciary co-chair for student government. Welcome, Ethan. Please give your opening statement.
Thank you, Andrew. Hello, everyone. My name is Ethan Werner. I'm running for Speaker of the House. Tonight, I want to tell you a story. I want to bring you back to 1962. It's a warm Sunday evening at Wake Forest as you and the rest of your peers walk down to Waite Chapel. This isn't for Sunday services, though. It's to hear the student government deliver its weekly report for the community. As you sit down in the Waite Chapel, you realize how integrated student government is with the campus community. For you and your fellow students, student government meetings are almost a sacred activity, a time for critical engagement, campus discussion, and community service. Fast forward to 2021. Ask yourself, when was the last time you attended a Senate meeting as engaging and as worthwhile as what I just described? It seems unfathomable in our current configuration for the community to actually attend Senate meetings or engage with their student government on a regular basis. Indeed, for 99% of students on this campus, you probably never attended or tuned in to watch a Senate meeting because, simply put, student government is lacking the very thing it seeks to achieve: proper student-driven governance. The examples I just provided you are based on actual activities that took place during the 1962-1963 student government. Through painstaking analysis of our records in ZSR special collections and archives, I discovered that as time went on As our campus expanded and saw large increases in total enrollment, student government had trouble keeping up. You will find, as I did, for example, in the minutes from 1984, concern over dwindling student involvement in our Senate meetings. You might also find that student government had trouble adapting to these changes and over time succumbed to evolutionary pressures, proving itself incapable of changing with the times. Today, student government suffers from a very similar condition. On average, our Senate meetings only bring in 1 to 5 observers at most. While student government is good at promoting events on campus, we've lost touch with our original mandate to represent the student body. In effect, we have come to accept that engaging with all students on campus is too time-consuming and too exhausting an effort. With proper reform, though, with continued dedication and commitment to our ideals of representative government, we can truly regain a culture of student-driven governance at Wake Forest. That is why I am running to put the student back in student government. It is time for a candidate willing to break the status quo. It is time for a speaker who is willing to shift the paradigm and reorient the Senate toward the student. Thank you.
All right. So this is a question for both of you. We'll start with Brandon and then shift to Ethan. What plans do you have in order to make student government more effective and productive internally? Brandon.
Yeah, so I think the main thing is really listening to what our senators have to say, because our senators have really some awesome ideas, especially the freshmen that come in and they observe everything for that first 3 to 5 weeks or so before elections. I was blown away this year. I have a lot of freshmen on my committee by some of the ideas they had, and I was really excited to start to help with them, getting them set up with people in administration who could help guide them along that process. So I think in terms of making student government more effective, I think we need to kind of promote that ideal. And I think exec needs to be a voice that's there to help guide senators and also listen to students and see what kinds of things they want to see out of us. So I think the most effective student government is one that considers people of all kinds of diverse perspectives and what their needs are. Otherwise, we're not catering to the students, we're catering to ourselves. So in terms of effectiveness, I do really think we just need to stop, take a moment and listen to what the people have to say.
Thanks, Braden. Ethan?
Absolutely. So one of the key issues currently afflicting student government is one of redundancy and irrelevancy, especially as it pertains to Senate affairs. Much of Senate activity is just a configuration of reports, but we're not actually giving those reports to the community, really. If we're only drawing in 5 people, then we're just giving reports to ourselves. We're just looking back at a mirror and trying to understand what's going on campus. Now, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is to say that we need to find a way to make Senate a vanguard of student government affairs and not just something that casually floats along the river. To do this, I outline a number of things in my policy platform. You can review it at my website at the top of my Zoom screen. The first thing I would do is amend current committee configurations. Currently, senators are barred from joining any other committee except the one that they are assigned to by the Speaker of the House. This becomes problematic as senators running on a platform, say, to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion on campus might be placed in the Campus Life Committee, or they might be placed in the Academic Committee. As a result, the platform they ran on might end up on the back burner as they're forced to take on more tasks in their committee as assigned by their committee co-chairs. I would amend that requirement on day one. I would also look to reconfigure constituency and representation models. One of the things I would do is ensure that senators are actually engaging with their constituencies. Now, I would note that the word constituency is something that student government doesn't like to throw around all that much. And one of the reasons for that is that it's so difficult for us to actually engage with a defined constituency. Constitutionally, senators are responsible for every single member of their class. And as you can imagine at Wake Forest, senators already have enough to deal with as it is. They're not going to want to engage with every single member of their class. As Speaker, I would increase the incentives for senators to want to engage with their constituents by reconfiguring the ways we address students on campus. One of the ways I would do this is I would ensure that senators are directly responsible for subsections of their class and not every member of their class. Doing so will ensure that we actually have student voices in government and ensure that our Senate operations are as effective as they can be. The final thing that I would do as Speaker is ensure that there is more co-sponsorship legislation introduced in Senate. I am very proud of the fact that I introduced the most co-sponsorship legislation in Senate in the 2021 session. One of the reasons for this is that I firmly believe that co-sponsorship legislation, which is essentially a process where student government co-sponsors events on campus, allows other student groups and other student organizations to become involved in the legislative affairs of student government. If we want to reclaim a culture of student-driven governance on campus, it starts at the Senate level. So all of these things revolve around my ideals to put the student back in student government.
Thank you both. The next question. How do you plan to engage with the student government president and cabinet? Braden?
So I think it's really great to have a good open line of communication with the president, not just in cabinet or in exec meetings, but throughout the entire week. Whether it's Ali, Caroline, or Peng, I know that all three of them have great ideas. So it's important that we are able to communicate our ideas. And for me, it would be the ideas of all of those in Senate and the student body, that we're able to talk about those things freely and sort of consider how we can best present them to the Senate. Because there's a number of ways the Senate can act on things. There's the resolution process, bill process, and statement process. So I think having someone like a president who has a good knowledge of what student government does and how we ought to act on things would be great. And I plan on having a good relationship with the president so we can be most effective and move swiftly on things that need to be acted swiftly on. And for longer term projects, we have a good relationship that can progress on projects for months or even the entire year.
Thank you, Braden. Ethan?
Well, I will be quite frank and say that the current configuration of cabinet makes it one of the most obsolete bodies in all of student government. In effect, we, as I've mentioned earlier, are just speaking to ourselves. Cabinet doesn't actually do much engagement with the student body. It needs serious reform. One of the ways I would restructure cabinet is by piloting a new program called community liaisons. This will prove especially important as it will make cabinet meetings actually relevant to student government affairs. The community liaisons program would be a program that I would pilot that would allow me to appoint specially targeted community liaisons to serve as representatives of subsections of the student body in cabinet. Of the liaisons I would appoint a diversity, equity, and inclusion liaison. I would appoint a resident advisor liaison. I would also appoint an international students liaison, a domestic student policy liaison. These are some of the positions that I would seek to hone in on as Speaker of the House. I would also seek to appoint a student athletics liaison as well. These groups in particular have long been disenfranchised from student government legislative activity. Their voices have often been unheard in our decision making. And I think it is especially critical that the Speaker of the House be able to truly claim that they can speak for the House. I would ensure that we have all voices in cabinet so I can come to those decisions. So those are some of the ways I'd restructure cabinet.
Thank you both. Next question. What do you think should be the top 3 priorities for student government to accomplish in this coming year? Braden.
So I think the main thing really is a decentralization of power. One thing I'm concerned about with student government is exec gaining power. I want to do the complete opposite. I want to give more power to co-chairs, and to senators. The role of the speaker really isn't to do a bunch of campus-related initiatives on their own. It's really to control the operations of Senate and to help co-chairs and senators work on their initiatives. So that's one. The second thing I want to see accomplished is a big push on campus to improve our mental health apparatus. The UCC for the past couple of years, or at least since I've been at Wake, has always seemed to be underfunded and swamped with demand. I would want to work with administration to properly fund the UCC, hire more counselors so we can meet the growing demand, the unfortunate growing demand for mental health help on campus, which we've especially seen during COVID-19. The third thing I'd want to bring up is we need to reflect on what happened during the pandemic. Some things went well. For example, I'm a firm believer in the fact that Canvas has been a beneficial platform for learning, and that's something I'd like to see kept moving out of the pandemic. Of course, I'm not a fan of online classes. I don't think many people are, but I think Canvas is something that's great. It compiles all your things into one place for your course, helps with organization. So that's something I would want to work with people in student government or with administrators who I already have great relationships with moving forward into next year.
Thank you, Braden. Ethan?
Sure. My foremost priority as speaker will be shifting the paradigm. It is imperative that we address the roots of organizational ineptitude and decay. Without proper analysis of the issues afflicting student government, regardless of what policies we introduce, we would fail to adequately address our condition. I would seek a radical paradigm shift on campus. I would ensure that all students on campus are as involved in student government affairs as can possibly be attained. Doing so is not only in alignment with the motto and mission of the university, but it is also in alignment with my own values and the mission of student government to represent all students on campus. Reclaiming our original mandate is especially critical. We saw, for example, in the spring, misinformation rampant across campus. We need a student government that is as central in our communities as it possibly can be. We need a student government where students can come and present their concerns and ideas. It shouldn't just be this abstract body that floats out in the ether. No, it should be a vanguard for student progress and affairs on campus. I would work to shift that paradigm. The second critical issue afflicting all students on campus are issues related to health and wellness. The Old Gold and Black did a survey a few months ago looking at mental health among students on campus. Students were asked to rate their mental health on a scale of 1 to 10. The survey found that 52% of students on this campus would rate their mental health below a 5. That's abysmal, and we need to address the mental health crisis that continues to afflict our communities. I am very proud of my record to advocate for expanded telehealth programs, not only on the Wake Forest community, but also across the state and the nation. I would seek to do two things to combat the mental health crisis. First, I would seek to advocate for better funding and resource allocation for the University Counseling Center and relevant campus partners. Second, I would seek to expand telehealth services and continue advocating, as I have already done, for the easing of interstate licensure requirements, which have hitherto prohibited telehealth services from crossing state lines. The third thing I would do is the editor-in-chief of the Old Gold and Black has touched on in some of her articles, is to incorporate a paradigm shift toward mindfulness in our everyday affairs. Now, obviously, that's quite hard when we have millions of things to do each day, whether it be tests and exams, but finding ways that we can be grateful every day and be mindful is especially imperative. I'm not saying I can solve all these issues overnight, but I will work tirelessly to address them. In the same vein as health and wellness, I will also seek to engage with local communities. Student government has often fallen short in its engagement with local communities outside the Wake bubble. I would seek to expand health and hygiene products such as menstrual and dental products. I would seek to combat dental deserts across the state and ensure that we combat period poverty in communities which it hits the most, especially along racial and ethnic lines. I would also ensure that we have ADA accessibility, among other things. You can review all these policies on my website. The final issue which I would seek to address as speaker is reform of the university judicial system and honor and ethics council. As you can imagine, being the co-chair of the Student Government Judiciary Committee, I'm particularly partial to this issue. I'm also a member of the Honor and Ethics Council, and I am fully willing to admit that our current configuration has lost touch with the student. Part of the reason for this was that in the 1990s, our judicial system was updated so that students were no longer elected to our judicial systems. While I think by and large this was a good change, in the process, we lost an ethic of student-driven governance in our judicial processes. We also have seen since 2015 an exponential increase in honor code violations on campus. I would seek to commission a study to address the roots of these issues and also advocate for better training for HEC and BIA members and lobby for compensation therein. In short, the issues afflicting our communities today can be defined as one of conscience. We need a speaker who has an understanding of the issues afflicting not only student government, but our communities. We need a speaker who is willing to combat the paradigms which have hitherto inhibited organizational progress. That is what I would do as speaker, and that is the commitment I bring to the Wake Forest community.
Great. So, Ethan, we have a community question for you. Your platform includes overhaul the appropriations process and ensure that all financial allocations and budget proposals are voted upon by the Senate. Can you explain this further? The student asks, are you suggesting that we get rid of SBAC and SOFO?
No, that's not what I'm suggesting, but I'd be happy to clarify what my policy is on that. So let me give you some context on why I believe the Senate needs to have a more active role in voting on the appropriations process. The first reason I would bring this up is one of just practicality. Our current budget, the one that was proposed for the next fiscal year, was never actually shown to the Senate. In fact, I don't think any of us have even been questioned about the contents about or the certain budget proposals or allocations that might go into that. This is especially important. I'm not sure if the community knows this, but executive members actually receive a stipend for their work in student government. Being as transparent with our budget processes is especially important. Now, this is also in alignment with my mission to make the Senate geared back toward the student. I would ensure that all budget allocations and proposals from the student government side anyway, are voted upon by the Senate. We actually used to have, up until the 1990s, an appropriations and budget committee in student government. Now, a lot of their operations had to deal with clubs that were not qualified to seek SBAC funding. Eventually, that committee was disbanded by vote of the Senate. But as a consequence of that, we lost touch with a very fundamental democratic value, which is voting on appropriations on the student government side. I mean, can you imagine if Alexander Hamilton had full control over the Treasury when the United States was starting off? I mean, I don't know if we would have the Hamilton musical today if that was the case. So we need a student government and a Senate that can take a more active role in the budget process. We also need to make those budget proposals and budget allocations as transparent as they can be. Student government is one of the largest groups on campus, one of the most important, if not the most important, at least in theory. We need to ensure that the budget allocations we do promote, not only in committee or give out in committee, but also to events we have on campus are as transparent as they can be. That is a critical matter, not only because we need to do that as it pertains to our values and mission as student government, but also because it's a fundamental pillar of any representative government. So that is what I mean by an overhaul of the appropriations process.
Awesome. Thanks, Ethan. Braden, a question for you from the community. Your platform includes Senators generally have strong transformative ideas that can go unexplored due to the lack of guidance from those in higher positions. What ideas do you have to implement this change and achieve senatorial empowerment?
Yeah, so the main thing is, I think, getting senators and co-chairs in particular set up with people in administration who fit their area of interest. So for this past year as co-chair of the academic committee, I've met monthly with the Office of the Dean of the College, which is directly in charge of everything that happens in the undergraduate college. And honestly, it's been one of the most productive professional relationships I've had. We're able to have a free flow of ideas and information between administrators and then us students. We're able to give direct feedback on upcoming decisions that are happening. A big thing has been fall planning. We've been able to give the input of students really wanting in-person classes for the fall. And I think, as we all know, that seems to be what's going to happen in the fall, barring some sort of big turn in the pandemic. So that's really what I would want to do. I would want to gauge senator interest and co-chair interest at the beginning of the year, and then use my position to get those meetings set up with administrators in their areas of interest. That way they can have that same sort of free flow of ideas and information, and administration can hear directly from students more frequently.
Great. Thank you, Braden. We now move to closing statements. Ethan.
Thank you, Andrew. If I were to sum up this race in one word, it would be vision. I implore you, for those watching online tonight or after the fact, to go to each of our respective websites and compare for yourselves our platforms. On my website, you will find a 21-page roadmap for the future of student government. You will find a detailed explanation of the personal philosophies and the beliefs that are grounded in my decision-making and in all of my policies. If we are to move student government forward in the realm of transparency, it's all on my website. My vision for student government will be as is detailed in my policy platform. That is my promise to this community. I will also say that my opponent's policy platform is essentially reduced to 2 bullet points per policy. In respect to Braden, you cannot possibly expect to lead a student government when you cannot be as thorough and as clear about your platform and vision for student government as possible. Additionally, this race is contested along normative lines. I do not believe that student government has lived up to its mandate. If you were to take away anything from my platform, it is that I am a firm believer in student governance and grassroots advocacy. I believe that student government has fallen short of its mandate to represent all students on campus, in part because it has lost track of these values. I will work diligently as Speaker to combat the normalization of gross engagement deficits across campus and work to restore faith in our institution of governance. Now more than ever, I believe that it is time to put the student back in student government. I hope that I can count on your support on April 13th. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ethan. Braden?
Yeah, thank you. So this past year has been quite difficult for us all. And as we're hopefully moving out of the pandemic, it's important that we have strong leadership in student government that is willing to listen to everyone in our student population and will take the time to understand what concerns other people have other than their own concerns. Together, we can address issues like mental health or access to academic resources, or really anything else that can come up throughout the year, by considering what solutions might work best for the most people, not just the things that work best for the one person that's making decisions. We are stronger together, and as Speaker, teamwork will be my primary focus, both within student government and, as I mentioned, as a response to the previous question, with administration. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to watch the debate tonight. It's been a pleasure getting to speak to you. I hope I have your vote on April 13th. And if you'd like to learn more about my platform or get in touch, visit my website, bradenforspeaker.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Braden and Ethan. We now turn to our final debate, the one for president. Our first executive candidate is Caroline Wright, who is running for the position of president. She is a rising senior and the current Campus Life co-chair for student government. Welcome, Caroline. You may now give your opening statement.
Hello, I would first like to thank Andrew for moderating this debate and to all students who are watching at home or in the residence halls. Hi, my name is Caroline Wright. I am a rising senior here at Wake Forest. I'm studying biology and chemistry and have been a member of student government for the past 3 years. First year initially as a representative from Collins Hall for my freshman senator, and then as a sophomore senator and the physical planning co-chair, and then finally this past year as a sitter on the Campus Life Committee, and then in the spring semester, the co-chair of the Campus Life Committee. Just briefly, my platform focuses on 4 main points. Those are a unified and informed COVID response, as we've seen over the course of the entire year, where there's been confusion surrounding the administration's communication to the student body and different levels of student understanding in terms of policies surrounding student conduct, the changes in between operating statuses. And so I would like the administration to have a more informed and more unified response to student needs in terms of policy surrounding COVID-19. I also want to prioritize mental health on campus. As the Campus Life co-chair this spring, I was tasked along with my other co-chair in our committee to work to pull together the Mental Health Week sponsored by student government. Through exposure of planning that week, I've realized just how deep the need for increased mental health resources on campus are for students, particularly this year. An additional platform point is I want to really enhance the first year experience in terms of the freshmen we have, the first year students this year who've had an interesting, albeit stressful and confusing first year here at campus, and fully engage the incoming class of new freshmen and support them in the best way possible through a creation of a mentorship program that works along student advising and helping those new deeks find their place at Wake Forest. One of my final points is I want student government to really fulfill its more outward facing role that we haven't, as touched by Ethan and Braden in the previous section of the debate. We really do not prioritize reaching all respective voices on campus in terms of going out and meeting students and hearing their concerns. We are more of a reactive body in terms of things are brought to us that we then fix instead of getting out in the community and responding to our constituents through meetings with them. Thank you.
Great. Our second executive candidate is Ali Schwartzberg, who is running for the position of president. She is a rising senior and the current Speaker of the House for student government. Hello, Ali. Please give your opening statement.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Andrew, and I did really enjoy hearing about the debate for my job. And thank you, everyone who is tuning in at home. I just want to start by acknowledging that it's been a really hard year for all of us, and I want to emphasize all of us here. For the freshmen, this is your first time away from home. You're coming into a campus community during a pandemic, and that must be really hard. For the seniors, you're about to graduate and enter the working world, and that change is scary too. And for everyone in between, this is the Wake that is different for many of us from what we expected or what we're used to. In this time, student leaders have come together, though, to help our community, and I'm really proud to have been a part of this group of students leading the charge. We are a resilient student body, and we are now prepared for a change, which is good because we're about to face a new change. We're about to have a new administration, and in this period of time, we get to look back on the last 15 years and think about all the policies that still serve our needs and bring those into the future. And we get to look back at all the things that no longer fit what students need on this campus and leave it behind. While we're setting this new foundation, it's important that we have a continuity in student leadership. As speaker, I have experience advocating for students in this way. And we really need to know that it's not easy to walk into a room of administrators as a student and say, actually, this is what students need and we need to do it now. I'm experienced at this, and we will need to be doing this during this period of change. when Dr. Wente starts on July 1st. My platform is student-centered. It's about bringing other students' voices to the forefront, and it's about decentralizing this concept of authority so that each of our voices can be working toward a shared vision, but in our own unique ways with our own unique backgrounds. It's about empowering our students to work together for our shared vision of a more perfect wake. And I say more really importantly here. We're never going to be perfect, but we can get closer. There's a focus on structure in my platform, and that's about infusing inclusion and equity into every decision the university makes, not just a diversity and inclusion committee, not just a seminar once a semester. And it's also about tangible changes. And so some of the main ones I focus on that impact individual students daily are Title IX and bias policies, UCC resources, and resident advisors. And I'll touch on those, I'm sure, later in the debate. But ultimately, my goal is to help all 5,000 of us set a strong foundation for what our wake can look like for the next decade under this new leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. Our third executive candidate is Peng Pickett, who is running for the position of president. He is a rising senior and a member of Alpha Phi Alpha. Hello, Peng. Please give your opening statement.
Hey, Andrew. Thank you for that introduction. I was going to say, it looks like we might both live in Deacon Place because our bed frames look the same. My opening introduction, you do? Okay. All right, my opening introduction is basically this. My platform is centered around being with the people, a representative of the people, and in this case, the people is a student body. I was blessed to be able to have an opportunity to serve as student body president my senior year of high school. Prior to that, I actually wasn't involved with student government. That has kind of replayed itself in my college experience because I've been involved with a lot of things throughout my time here at Wake, but never directly involved with student government. Yet I feel that this position coming into this new year and this new landscape as we get a new student body president, I think it could be a similar type of situation where that experience may work in my favor because it's allowed me to navigate the Wake Forest landscape in a way that has put me in contact with a lot of people who wouldn't have been in my social circle unless I was put in a situation that pushed me outside of my comfort zone. And that's really, the basics of my platform is that I'm an outsider in a lot of senses. Like I said, I haven't been in student government throughout my time here at Wake, but I've been on the student activity fee committee since my first semester sophomore year. I'm currently serving as the NPHC president. I was blessed to be at RA in Maya Angelou Hall. And I list all those things not to be braggadocious, but to cite them as where I'm going to be pulling my perspectives from. All of those perspectives I listed, especially student activity fee committee, have allowed me to sit in front of an extremely diverse amount of groups as they come and present. It's different every Friday. We get different groups and it's almost kind of like, oh, here's something new about campus you didn't know. Oh, here's something new. And it's always enlightening to gain that new perspective. And that is where I'll be pulling my perspectives from if I'm blessed to be able to become student body president. It'll be that multitude of just anything can go. That's usually how it is on Fridays within the student activity fee committee. But yeah, that's enough about me.
All right, so we've got a number of questions, both generated by myself and by the community. The order at which we will pose and answer these is I'll ask the question and then Ali, you'll first respond, Peng, you'll next respond, and then Caroline, you'll go last. So the first question, what lessons did you learn from COVID and how will you bring them to student government? Ali?
Yeah, so I actually had COVID on my 21st birthday while I was home over break. And so very personally, what I learned from COVID is how to keep the hope alive despite everything going on around you. You can't taste anything, you can't smell anything, you feel really cruddy, honestly. And yet there's still a reason to hope because it's not over. And I've seen that in our students so much this year. I, am always so surprised and warmed to go out on campus and to see all these student organizations meeting on the quad, hosting events, trying to do some kind of mix of Zoom and in person because they want to do in person, but they want to include their friends who are at home still. And that's not something that we would have ever thought was possible a year ago. I've been fortunate to lead a body of 64 people this year as Speaker of the House and to work with a lot of organizations previously as the Diversity and Inclusion Co-Chair and in my other campus roles. And what I've learned from these peers of mine is how to find a way to make things work despite immense change. And so I'm excited to see how we can bring this forward into the next year. I know it's going to take a village, but I think we can all do it together.
Great, thanks, Allie. And then Peng, same question to you.
What have I learned? What have I learned about COVID?
That's right. What lessons did you learn from COVID, and how will you bring them to student government?
Okay. One lesson I would say I learned is that Wake Face is real. It is definitely a real thing. I'm a person who, not because of COVID, but it happened through COVID with the shift to online learning, struggled tremendously academically, and I mean tremendously. But as people have mentioned prior to this point, when discussing mental wellness, a lot of what we do here at Wake is smile and just like push through it, which is great, and that makes us the strong students who we are, and that's why we got to where we are here. But I think there has to be a point in time where we have to pause the things that are pushing us and excelling us and realize that it's okay to reach out to your fellow peers, to your students that you're in class with, and know that, hey, we are going through a pandemic, or hey, there are things outside of just your resume that can be beneficial to your life, and that can also add to your overall college experience. That is one thing COVID, I think, definitely pushed me in a direction of. Before, I never really explored the Renota Trail until this last semester, when I was in my room 20 hours a week. It kind of pushed me, like I said earlier in my platform, to get outside my comfort zone. And it leads me to a quote, since Ali said a quote as well, a quote by Tupac Shakur, which was, after a dark night, there's always a brighter day. And I kind of feel like that's where we're at right now in terms of, Wake's atmosphere. We've kind of had a dark night, but through that dark night, as Ali mentioned, a lot of people were illuminated to all the things that Wake can offer, all the resources that are, at your disposal if you just take the time to learn about them. And that is, one thing I've learned about from COVID is that although, we can be strong, it's okay to lean on each other, because when we lean on each other and we're united, we're stronger together. That's what I learned from COVID.
Thank you, Peng. Caroline, the same question to you.
I would say probably the two main things that I've learned through COVID from quarantine through this school year have been adaptability and resilience. Adaptability in terms of just having to navigate a new world. Everything is on a different platform. It's, at least for people who've seen Wake in a normal year, everything is shifted. And I've seen it in myself and friends, is people have been able to navigate those changes and make appropriate changes, whether it's how they're studying, how they're living their life outside of class, and in student government, how we face different challenges in terms of resolving student problems or seeking out different things on campus that we think we can help have a hand in changing. So I think adaptability as well as resilience, similar to how Ali touched on hope. It has been a very difficult year. People have been able to live through this experience with different levels of success. And I've seen that while we may not always be at our 100% and we may be putting up that front, I have seen a very bright characteristic of resilience across the students, as we have suffered and had joyous times and a whole different bunch of emotions through this year. I do see an underlying resilience in our students as we have bounced back from this difficult year and are really looking forward to what will hopefully feel like a more normal year next year. I hope to bring those back to student government and continue our adaptability. As I said, we've had to change a little bit of our structure in student government, things that we were previously able to do, the meetings we were able to have, the face-to-face conversations, those have changed. And so student government has done a good job, but I feel like we continue to do next semester, next year, is modify the way we handle some of the functions of student government. And I do think we have resilience in our body itself. I was very surprised by the amount of freshman senators who were reapplying and to be elected this past year. I was nervous that the lack of communication, just like in person that we normally have at student government meetings, and just through the student government culture within student government outside of our meetings, I was scared without those things, they may not be as enticed to rejoin student government, but seeing such a long list of freshman senators who are really interested in coming back and doing some work, despite how the year has gone, has been a prime example of our resilience.
Great. Next question. Imagine you've been voted in as student body president. Congrats. You're starting your term alongside Dr. Wente, and the two of you have an introductory meeting. What would you share with her? Allie, we start with you.
Awesome. So I've met Dr. Wente, and it was really great to talk to her. So I'm going to talk about what we talked about and what I wish I had been able to talk about during that brief meeting. First, I would say that I'm excited. This is a really unique opportunity to set the stage for not just next year, but 10 years. If you think back to 15 years ago, I bet when the Hatches first started, you had the same opportunity. And so it's really an opportunity to put forward what students need right now so that it's not just impacting us. It'll last way long after we graduate. Two of the things that we talked about that were really important to both of us when I met with Dr. Wente was first, mental health resources on campus. And I know we can all talk about how there needs to be more funding and more counselors, and that is very true. Long-term, that needs to happen. But we also talked about the one-year contract policy, which is what the University Counseling Center currently does, where when there's a vacancy, rather than fill it with a full-time position for multiple years, they'll fill it for the interim year and then try to look for a longer-term hire. However, that counselor is a counselor, and they're going to have a caseload of students, and that caseload of students has no idea that that counselor is a one-year counselor. So if you start in maybe March with that counselor is going to be gone by July, and you have no idea. They don't tell you this. So short-term, one of the things I would talk about with Dr. Wente would be alleviating that issue of transparency and clarity so that students know that they're building a relationship that has an end date. And that's a really important factor because the relationship is so critical to mental health care. I would also want to talk with her further about inclusion and implementing that throughout campus, again, not in these one-off conversations, but in the culture, and help her to understand Wake Forest's culture and history regarding conversations of inclusion and equity. It's a unique culture. It's different than it is at Vanderbilt, which is where she's coming from. And fortunately, having been the D&I co-chair and having been on President Hatch's commission as the youngest member, I know this history and I can work with her through it. And so talk about inclusion, but I would also talk about supporting staff members who are students as well. They provide such an infrastructure for our community and they don't get enough support. The flexibility clause that just got implemented is pretty problematic. It says that they have to take on more responsibility for no extra pay or support. I would try to help her realize why this is an issue. I think she probably would. Finally, I would probably talk with her, and I know this would be a long meeting at this point, but I would talk with her about Title IX policy. You need mandatory reporting sources for accountability. You also really need confidential support services for just like, hey, I'm here and I see you and I hear you. And the current way that policies are structured puts a lot of the burden on the survivor to be the one who, if they're unsafe in their class or uncomfortable in their class, be the one who moves online. If they're unsafe or uncomfortable in their housing, to be the one who moves, to be the one who's always taking that step for their own safety. And I would really love for the university to take that step to protect their students. And so, I've started talking about these with her. I hope to continue having these conversations, but those would be the three main focuses I would touch on with her.
Thank you, Allie. Peng?
I would preface my answer to this by saying my personal leadership style has always been to address things one by one, because I believe sometimes like doing multiple things simultaneously can result in not getting multiple things done, but getting multiple things done poorly, i.e. multitasking. And so for me, there's a promise I made to an employee at the Chick-fil-A in Benton, Miss Monica, that, as a President's Day, I wasn't able to quite get this yet, but we're at this level, so I might as well take advantage of it. My promise was that I would look into seeing whether or not we could get a shuttle that would run from where the employees have to park at by the entrance of the Renota Trail to get them to where they're going, instead of them having to walk during, sometimes very unfavorable conditions. Like I know it's not cold anymore, but during the winter time, it was extremely cold. And that's where we had actually brought up the discussion, was just talking about the weather. So that would be my first initiative, because I feel like that's a very realistic goal. It's very, you name it, you fix it, and now you get the ball rolling. I think as someone coming into a position, it definitely feels good to, accomplish something within that first little bit of time. So that would be the first, thing I was saying in conversation, just so we could have a shared sense of success to move forward with. And from there, I would do a lot of the things Ali just mentioned, which is, looking deeper into the community and looking at the fact that this is a reawakening in a sense. This is our first woman president at Wake Forest's history. This is our first president in many, many years. So this is going to be a pivotal moment in terms of reforming who we can be. Right now, we all are embodying Pro Humanitate, but what does it look like when you take Pro Humanitate to the next level? What is the updated version of that? And that would be a lot of the context of how I would speak with that first conversation with our new incoming president.
Thank you, Peng. Caroline?
I would first congratulate her being a woman in STEM and leadership. I myself am a science major, and I love to see that represented at the university level, especially a woman in leadership, as Peng mentioned. I think the conversation, as Ali mentioned previously, surrounding mental health would want to be one of the first things mentioned. To expand upon Ali's points, I do believe that we need to hire a permanent counselor position, someone who speaks Mandarin and is able to connect with Chinese international students. The seniors incoming class, the rising seniors incoming class, I believe was 10% Chinese students. And at this point, we don't have anyone with the cultural fluency who works in the counseling center to really understand and to be able to advise students on the tough transition from wherever they're from in the international community onto Wake's campus. That's a very specific and individual change that's made in an individual's life when they come to Wake Forest. And I feel like having someone who also knows the language and knows the culture these students are coming from is going to be very important in kind of moderating their adjustment into Wake Forest society. I would also like to speak with her about just the culture on campus. As mentioned earlier, we are kind of at a critical mass at some points this semester, and between members of Greek organizations and members of people who are not Greek in terms of the causes of COVID. I think that's caused a rift in our campus that's obviously been there for a while, but I believe that was increased with the circumstances of the semester and the main problems due to the rising COVID cases being off-campus parties. I think informing her of that divide in between our student body is key as we maybe transition into a residential college, depending on where the administration goes with that plan. Acknowledging that rift is there in between some of the largest groups on our campus being the Greek community. I think that should be highlighted and addressed as we think about what we want our campus culture to look like under the leadership of a new president. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question goes actually to you, Caroline. Part of your platform and this is from a student. Part of your platform discusses a unified and informed response to COVID. Can you please briefly explain what this response looks like to you and how you would work to implement it?
Absolutely. The first point is a unified response. This comes from some of the experience I've had as a student government member and then just as a general member of the Wake Forest community. I feel like some of the policy decisions relating to COVID were not released to the student body at once. I feel like some students in positions, whether that's they're on the board of the COVID advisory board, who helped make the student compact. I feel like, or if they were a student government member who had a meeting with an administrator, I feel like we sometimes got bits and pieces of information and were able to maybe relay those to our constituents, but not everybody was hearing those things at the same time. There was also a lot of rumors surrounding policies related to COVID that just kind of, I believe, raised some fears in students as they didn't know. Like, I think my main two were the consequences to violating the code of conduct relating to COVID policies. There are a lot of rumors about, oh, are we going to get expelled? What's going to happen? And there was an accountability piece to that I don't think was clarified by the administration on how they were going to hold students who've broken the code of conduct accountable. And then the changing of the operation status of the campus. I know that was very variable in terms of what specific challenges the university was facing at each point in time, but not having some of those hard solidified points laid out that students could know led to a lot of confusion. So in the unified response, I want the administrators to take a better look at how they are disseminating information regarding to COVID policies. And as soon as a decision is made on the administrative level and it is confirmed and able to be relayed to the student body, I think that needs to happen as soon as possible. The second point is the uniform or the informed response. I don't think the administration has taken enough effort into really hearing the students' feedback on how the year has gone and adjusting their policies appropriately. Different people on this campus have experienced this year in different ways with varying levels of success. And I don't think we've had a pathway or any kind of feedback operation to the administrators to communicate just things we want. It's kind of trickled through multiple routes. I think if we had some kind of pipeline or something more accessible to all students, they could relay their concerns and just kind of like how they're feeling at this campus. I feel like the university would be better informed in making those policy decisions. As Kate mentioned earlier in the debate, it took a lot of work to get kitchens reopened. And I don't think the university realized at the beginning of the conversation how much that had an impact on student life, just having that oven to make cookies with your friends. Not having that resource there was really hard for people who didn't live in a living situation that had a kitchen. So just simple things like that, I think the administration would be able to make more informed policy decisions by really knowing how students are actually feeling and not relying on a select handful of individual students who serve on a committee or who worked on the COVID Compact. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. The next community question is for Allie. Part of your platform discusses prioritizing on-campus organizational events and small socially distanced gatherings. How will you go about prioritizing more on-campus events, and how will you utilize the new Winston-Salem First building that Wake Forest has acquired?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew, and whoever asked that question. I just want to start by saying that in order to have a student experience, we need to acknowledge the safety mechanisms in place because there's still a pandemic. And so the safety mechanisms kind of look three different ways. In my view, there's the plan, which is wear your mask when you're not X feet apart, sit X feet apart, the very basic level, like this is the plan for safety. And then there's the contingencies, which is you got to quarantine. And if you're quarantining, we need to make sure those students have outside time. And when they can't taste or smell anything, that there's somebody there supporting them, because I remember calling my friends crying when I couldn't smell. And then there's the vaccine. And that's the biggest one that needs to be focused on in terms of safety plans, because it's not enough to just say there's a vaccine now, we're all going to get the vaccine, make it required. And I think Duke just made it required. We need to talk about the barriers to access on the vaccine. So you need to consider how much does it cost? Do certain regions have access to a better vaccine? How are we going to help students get it? How do we prioritize who gets it when there's a new one last minute? And once that safety plan is in place, this is what prioritizing student organizations in-person events looks like. There's organizational events, which has to go through a really long process through the Office of Student Engagement. And that process is very specific. And if you don't get the right waiver, then you can't have the event and you have to have 17 different meetings. That process needs to be very clear to students, very explicit to students, and to every student organization the same. When I was on the President's Commission on Race, Equity, and Inclusion, I was on the Student Social Experience Subcommittee, and we talked a lot about inequitable space allocation and how different students know how to reserve spaces and what that process looks like based on their organizations. Greek organizations tend to have an easier time doing it than other organizations. So we need to clarify that process and streamline that process for bigger events. Small gatherings shouldn't need to go through that big process. We should be able to use outdoor spaces, lounge spaces, without putting that burden on resident advisors to have these casual, informal interactions with our friends who happen to be in our same organization. There was a policy earlier this year that said if X amount of people from the same organization are found having X kind of gathering, then that organization will get in trouble. And that puts a lot of pressure on students to not hang out with their friends if they all happen to be in the same club. So alleviating that burden for small gatherings would be important. And then if we're talking about using this new space, I know there's a gym and there's some classrooms and it might be used for lounge spaces and storage, and then for reservable space. Reserving that space needs to be a very clearly outlined process that every exec of every student organization is aware of. so that certain organizations can't just co-opt that space and other organizations are left floundering. It's probably going to be the newer organizations, the unchartered organizations, which should still be able to use space, by the way. The organizations that maybe have some inactivity due to the pandemic and they don't really know how to get back up again. All of those organizations need to be able to utilize the space just the same as the big 300-person organizations do. So I hope that answered your question, but that's how I would handle it.
Thank you, Ali. The last question from the community, Peng, is for you. It asks, as the candidate with the least student government experience, what experiences will you draw on in this role?
Wow, that's a great question. For me, being the candidate of the least student government experience, what experiences would I draw on? For me, as you mentioned at the beginning of this call, I've been a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And for me, as Caroline mentioned, so much of our campus is Greek. And I'm a first gen, also, with that, never really been Greek affiliated prior to that. And through that experience, it kind of brought me into a whole realm of interacting with my LB, Shawnee Brown, like that showed me a side of the athletic community that I was not aware of. And it bestowed upon me a new perspective in terms of okay, maybe they can't hang out this much, but it's not from a choice of, oh, we can't. It's more so no, our schedule is boom, 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 boom. It's literally not that much freedom. I wasn't aware of that knowledge before. Other perspectives, as far as being a RA, that was an awesome experience. Being able to share the things that didn't work for me my freshman year and kind of see how that plays out in, your current, residents is very, very enlightening because you can see, the work in the community right before your eyes. Another perspective I would say that's really helped me was my first year being in Babcock. To be honest, I wasn't going to stay at Wake past my freshman year. I really didn't have a good experience my first semester, and I was looking to transfer to Chapel Hill. But that wasn't because I didn't like Wake. It was because I didn't give myself the chance to discover Wake. I was pretty much going every weekend the first semester here. And then when I actually did begin to go into the community, when I did, actually attempt to have conversations with my roommate, who oddly enough, we didn't get along our freshman year, but he went his path and ended up as IFC president. And now I'm here as NPHC president. And it almost seems poetic because, the perspectives are allowed to coexist and unite. And that would be what I bring as far as perspectives outside of student government. That would be, I would hope beneficial to the, the overall energy of Wake Forest and how we can all coexist, especially with, another really interesting perspective, sorry to go over the time so much, is, being a hometown kid. I have a lot of roots here in Winston-Salem. My great-grandmother owned the barber school here, and she was the first African-American woman in the state of North Carolina to own a barber school. And for Davidson County, my grandfather, he was the first paid fire chief there and one of the longest serving fire chief. And all these things I feel kind of molded into my DNA and my desire to kind of serve and assist others. Both of those positions are about, serving and assisting. And I feel that is something that was, bestowed upon me. And I hope that can add to the perspectives that, albeit not from student government, I hope still, can contribute to a better Wake Forest.
Thank you, Peng. Before we shift into closing statements, deviating from the script here slightly, I would like to get an oral commitment from each of you that you will all promise to reach out and engage with the student trustee, whoever that ends up being for the coming year. Particularly with the last year with COVID, it's been really important to have that bridge between the student body and the board. And I know that having a strong relationship with the student government president was incredibly helpful for both myself and for Miles as we were carrying out our duties for the past year. So could I get all of you to just orally commit to reaching out and engaging and at least having a relationship with the student trustee for the next year?
Yes, I'll absolutely have that relationship.
Of course. Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, 100%.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. Let's go into closing statements. Peng, why don't you kick us off?
To close, I would say whether you vote for me, whether you vote for Caroline, whether you vote for Allie, I think the Wake Forest community is going to benefit greatly from what's about to happen in terms of our overall trajectory. We've all kind of pounded it time and time again. This is definitely a reshaping if we allow it to be. We're kind of at a blank slate in a sense when it comes time for this new school year to start. And for me, I feel like, regardless if I get this position, if I don't get this position, my intention and my goal is for, everyone out there, every student at Wake to, be able to have the energy to make a change, to be able to, feel comfortable speaking about the things that may make them uncomfortable, speaking about the things that, we all may think in the back of our heads, but, haven't actually taken the extra initiative to, actually, feel comfortable making the change community-wide. That would be my goal. And that would be, my closing argument, regardless of who walks away from this, regardless of what's the final word, I think the change really begins within the student body, what this position is a representation of. It begins in everyone's heart and everyone's mind, making the conscious decision to better the Wake Forest community overall and collectively, not for recognition, not to be noticed, but because that's what Pro Humanitate is about. It's about being for humanity and for the greater good. Thank you.
Thank you, Peng. Caroline, your closing statement.
Right, thank you everyone for staying for this very last section of the debate. We appreciate you guys being informed voters and watching and tagging along and looking at all of our platforms. I want to start off and say I would love to have your vote. I know that not a lot of you guys know what student government does, but it has been honestly one of my favorite organizations on campus the past 3 years, serving in different various levels of involvement throughout my 3 years. I found just a really great community of students who really want to see change and who have taken initiative to make steps to that. And I would love to serve that body next year as president. Student government and politics are just a personal interest of mine. I intend on applying to medical school. So this leadership position is not just the next step on my career platform or my career path for me. I am running for this role because I really care about the Wake Forest community. I initially was unsure of whether or not I wanted to undertake the challenge of running for president, because it does take a lot, and I have to give credit to both of these candidates who've done outstanding jobs with their campaigns so far, because it is difficult. But the more I contemplated it, I realized I was like, I really have to do this. I have grown with the organization of student government for the past 3 years. And then as a member of the Wake Forest community, I realized there's an opportunity to shape the future of the university. And I realized I would be remiss if I didn't take that opportunity just because of the love I feel being a member of this community and wanting to make sure that all constituents of this campus feel that same way. It's certainly not true for everyone on campus. And as Peng mentioned, it's hard, especially that first year. So I want to be able to be an approachable president, someone who really puts the thought of the university ahead of personal ambitions, regardless of whatever role or platform I end up serving in next year. I want to say thank you for this opportunity and good luck to my fellow candidates.
Thank you, Caroline. Allie, your closing statement.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just want to start by saying that my leadership experience at Wake has only ever come when we needed it. I don't know, this is kind of like an act of God maybe, but I was the D&I co-chair right before the election for President of the United States. And so we were doing a survey of identity-based clubs and doing the President's Commission, trying to help represent underrepresented voices during a very contentious time in our country. And then the next thing that I did this past year was to create a mentoring program, actually with Caroline's co-chair Dave, for freshman students because there was a pandemic and they were gonna have such a hard time adjusting to school. And then we were working in the middle of the summer on Title IX policies because the federal government just changed everything in the middle of the summer during the middle of a pandemic. And we were trying to make sure that we could build community and support survivors. And then I worked on the University Counseling Center's director search during a time where mental health could not be more important. And so with that experience in leadership during times of change, when we really need this, I've learned how to project other voices and keep mine quiet. And that's sometimes hard. Mine needs to be there sometimes. Sometimes I need to say, nope, this is the way it's happening to administrators, but never to a student. And that's the key difference that I want to draw. I want to close just by thanking everyone for putting your trust in me this past year as speaker. We're a resilient student body, as Caroline said a couple times now, and I'm proud to have worked alongside you as we figured out this COVID year together. Next year is going to bring with it new challenges and new change, but I'm confident that together we can build a strong foundation for Wake's future. I hope Tuesday that you'll vote for Allie and give me the opportunity to continue serving you all. But you can learn more at allieforwake.com if you would like to, and I hope everyone has a great Sunday.
Awesome. Thank you all. So just remember, April 13th to April 14th is the voting day. Voting opens at 12 noon. You can vote on the link. And so please look out for a broadcast email and the student government social media for more information. Thank you all for a great debate night, and God bless.